All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Ifan AI workshop, and I would like to hand it over to Andrea, Ifan secretary.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. As Ali says, welcome to this IFAN webinar. Firstly, I'd like to offer apologies on behalf of the IFAN president, Vered Owen, who unfortunately can't be here for personal reasons. As Ali said, my name's Andrea Bedard-Smith. As well as being Secretary General of IFAN, I'm also the chair of the British Standards Society, which is the UK's Standards Users Group. I'd like to start off by taking the opportunity to very briefly introduce IFAN to those of you who may not know of us. IFAN was founded in Paris in 1974 at an international conference of national standards users who felt that they had a lot in common and that the International Standards Users Federation would give them an opportunity to both standards users worldwide to channel and pass on their views to international standards developing organizations, as well as support each other in the application of standards. Today, as well as national standards users groups, members include corporations, both large and small, and individual members. More information can be found on our website, ifan.org, and hopefully after this webinar you will visit it, as there are other webinars available there too. So I'm going to hand over to Mohammed Ali, who is the chair of IFAN Working Group 16, Education and Training. You probably all know that Ali works for HP and is an individual member of IFAN. Over to you.
Great, thanks, Andrea, for that introduction. So just before we start our workshop and go on to our keynote address, just some logistics. The webinar is being recorded and will be available for future playback later on the IFAN channel, and Andrea will go over this at the end as well. For any questions during the webinar, please use the Q&A session in the webinar, in the Zoom webinar feature, and submit your questions. If you have any technical difficulties, please feel free to email me or Andrea, and we can try to see if we can go ahead and fix it. With that, let me go ahead and go on to introduce our keynote speaker who is here, Manoj Saxena, who is the founder and executive chairman of Responsible AI Institute. So thank you, Manoj, for being here. And Manoj is a globally recognized leader in the development of ethical and trustworthy AI systems. He currently serves as the founder and executive chairman of the Responsible AI Institute, a nonprofit dedicated to advancing the adoption of responsible AI practices. He's also the founder of TrustWise, a company focused on generative AI safety. Manoj's career spans leadership roles in both the public and the private sector. He was a general manager of IBM Watson, where he helped bring AI into the mainstream. And he also served as the chairman of the board at the US Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, San Antonio. Beyond his executive roles, Manoj is a passionate educator and advocate. He teaches ethical AI design at the University of Texas at Austin and contributes to Cambridge University's program on responsible leadership in the age of AI. He's also a holder of 34 AI software patents and a director of the Saxena Family Foundation. So please join me in welcoming Manoj. And Manoj, over to you.
Thank you so much, and appreciate that introduction. It's a privilege for me to connect with all of you and speak about a topic which is very close to my heart and something that I am very passionate about, which is the responsible and beneficial adoption of this very powerful technology. So just as a quick way of introduction, the Responsible AI Institute is a 9-year-old nonprofit that I started. And this was as a quick story as to why this got about. So back then I was running Watson, and that was the open AI of its time, if you may. We were just getting going with AI. And a year into it, I was speaking to about 8,000 people in Washington, D.C., and talking about how we were going to apply AI to healthcare. And 10 minutes into my talk, this gentleman stops me in my track and he says, oh, I know what you're doing. My wife has third stage breast cancer, and you're building the Obama death panel machine because this machine can't understand and can't explain why it is deciding what it is deciding. And you and IBM are playing with people's lives by putting these black box systems out there. I mean, you talk about moments that change the direction of your life, and that's when I really sort of started going on this journey. That I recognized that this whole thought about move fast and break things that Silicon Valley is known for cannot and should not apply to AI, because this is, things that implies and applies to human beings. So, and I also realized that all the large companies are going to be touting their own technology. So, what was needed was a nonprofit. So, 9 years ago, we got going on the journey to create almost like a JD Powers of AI, an independent body that can help companies um, understand and deploy AI in a responsible and beneficial manner. So, what I'm going to share with you today is some of my scar tissue and also some of the significant shift that I've seen happen just over the last 6 months or 9 months in this area of AI, where the inflection point has really stepped up, and the role of for the groups like yours has become even more important, and the stakes are even more higher. The chaos that I'm seeing is beginning to get out of control, and so the role that all of you play becomes incredibly important in your companies, and I'm sure that's why we're gathered here. But what I'm seeing is that no responsible AI is no longer optional. It's no longer just about putting things on a website or as a marketing material, because 80% of AI projects are stalling in production. A lot of 80+% of the projects are not able to go from pilots to production. And that number is likely to go up with agentic AI coming in. Emerging regulations are shifting liabilities to AI adopters. You've seen this in the US, you've seen this in the EU AI Act. I like to almost compare it as companies are being told, you jump out of the plane and you stitch your own parachute as you're falling and hope you land okay. And I think that becomes, and again, an incredibly important requirement for responsible AI to be designed in. And business and reputational risk are compounding with the advent of things like voice and deepfakes and videos and agents going rogue. The risk has never been higher. And finally, the smarter companies, and I'll share with you what some of the case studies of people that are using it right, they're using it as a market signal and a competitive edge to improve their performance. So this is very different than what it was 2 years ago, where people were still sort of taking their own time figuring out responsible AI and figuring out how to do, policy documents and such. And what because people are realizing that there are three different types of harm that these systems can cause. As powerful as it is, the Google CEO said AI is as powerful to humanity as fire and electricity was, but also it's a double-edged sword. So when you look at some of the unintended harm, where an AI chatbot, I'm working with multiple healthcare companies where they're incredibly worried about clinical guidance not being followed by some of these bots. So we have seen this. Social platforms continue to publish polarizing content because they're prioritizing engagement over mental risk and societal risk. And then on the system-wide side, there are things that could be added into these systems at scale that could start creating even higher bias and higher sort of discrimination. So this problem is getting even bigger when you start adding generative AI on top of it, when you can start creating people's voices and people's videos. I mean, you see the one on the right here. I've seen multiple companies, multiple cases where, particularly the elderly are getting calls in the voice of their grandchild pleading for bail money at the middle of the night. And videos now going out from politicians asking for either donations or making false claims about other people. So the world's going to get even more chaotic with this death of truth, as I call it. And then the other two examples. So we have started publishing. We have a community of almost 40,000. We've started publishing last month this thing called Rogue AI Chronicles. We are actually beginning to put case studies and say, the responsible AI and this is Rogue AI. And then we start identifying in Rogue AI what technology was used, what was the implications of it, and how that problem could have been avoided if they had used responsible AI principles. So just kind of give you a principle choice of it. The other part that's happening is large companies are getting worried about Gen AI and agentic AI, because now anyone can build an agent, using LangGraph or Crew AI or Cursor. but very few can govern it, because agents can act unpredictably. They can overspend, they can leak data. It's like launching 1,000 Chuckies into your companies with a knife in their hand that could open up your systems. And there was a study that I saw, I think it was IDC, who said that in 3 years' time, they expect large enterprises to have, on average, 20,000 agents running around. So my question is, you have an HR department for humans. Where is your HR department for agents? How do you drug test these agents when you bring them on? How do you do performance appraisal of these? Because they could be coming from a ServiceNow and a Salesforce and an internal agent. You have no control tower and no policies, no principles. And today's governance mechanisms are almost like once a year you check the car. And those are not, because these are fast moving dynamic systems that you're launching. So there is a whole new insider threat that's coming up in enterprises because of AI. And the JP Morgan Chief Information Security Officer recently said, like in April, I think, he said digital skyscrapers are being built on quicksands. So the problem of responsible AI or lack thereof of is going to get massively clear and massively, I think, difficult for companies if they don't get ahead of it. What I am seeing in pieces is just in the last 3 years, responsible AI has been very static and siloed. People were happy with some static governance documents. They were building model cards, which are buried in PDFs. There was what I call as compliance theater. There was responsible AI washing, just like there's greenwashing, where people were just publishing stuff on their marketing stuff and saying, you know what, we are responsible. But that's not enough, and that's where people are now. The smarter companies are beginning to move it to embedded policy-driven controls rather than once in few months or once a year checkpoints into a car. You need to be able to drive the car safely, not just inspect the car once a year and get a badge on it. You need also third parties verifying it, not your own self. Some of the banks have told us we are self-marking our own homework. How do we know? And this is where Responsible AI Institute as a third party comes in and says, we will verify whether your bias metrics in there, or whether you're following NIST AI RMF, you're following BSI on the UK side. So we have these 17 global frameworks and standards, and we have this 1100 controls against which we start giving a third party view on how well your company or your AI system line up. And the other part is that current approaches, again, and I think this is going to catch up much faster than people think. Companies are not thinking about AI in a global way. They're focusing just on one AI model, and primarily they're obsessed about model risk management. Being obsessed about models is like being obsessed about the engine of your car and not looking at the whole car, or looking at fleets of cars and scooters and trucks and all. But if you look at AI folks, they're only looking at the engine. And everyone says model risk. The only company that I've seen that's really doing this well is American Express. They actually have a model risk management group and they have an AI risk management group, because they realize that they need to manage workloads and systems, not just models. And other part is people are ignoring critical business functions. So it's not just what you build, it's also what you buy. How do you know that your HR system is not racist? How do you know that your chatbot that you're buying is not going to leak sensitive data? So procurement. So we look at AI and we say you buy AI, you build AI, and you sell AI. And responsible AI has to cover all functions. And there is too much focus only on build AI, not enough on buy AI. And I'll share with you some examples of how some important government agencies have started actually using this and implementing it. And the other part is they're not communicating their efforts on what they're learning, either internally or externally, with responsible AI. And that's why we host industry roundtables, and we actually next month I'm taking the chief data officer of MasterCard with me to Las Vegas, and we're doing a fireside chat on MasterCard's experience trying to deploy responsible AI. So being able to take what they're learning, being able to say, hey, we are struggling with these issues, and get the community engaged. So we serve like a Switzerland to bring companies together and really start doing this the right way. And because there's numbers, and these numbers are going to continue to go bigger, and these are not theoretical. Responsible AI is profitable AI, and responsible AI can be very expensive AI if you don't start managing it, the design of it. It has to be designed all the way up, not in the end. Again, using a car analogy, if you say, well, safety means before, after I build the car and before it goes into the paint job, I will just stick a bumper in the front and bumper in the back and say I have responsible AI. That doesn't work. You have to design in the crumple zone right at the beginning when you start designing the car. So smarter people and smarter companies are recognizing that there are standards and guidelines, but they have to be put in place and enforced right at the beginning of the process and not towards the end of it in testing. Some of the experiences and examples of people that we work with, I wanted to tout here and acknowledge their leadership are companies like NatWest Bank in the UK. So they're very big on making sure that they are one of the first companies around green AI. So they have put a program in place to start measuring the carbon footprint of their AI. And we have provided them tools through member companies who have tools that measure. So we can measure through this vendor's tools how many micrograms of carbon are being consumed with every action that an AI takes. Every prompt, how much cost is it costing you? How much carbon is it emitting? And then how can you reduce the carbon footprint? How do you report out on it in an audit-ready manner? And they have come out to Responsible AI Institute and they got it externally verified. And now they are beginning to put that as part of their annual report to say we are committed to AI being both beneficial as well as being sustainable and green. A large healthcare system that I'm working with, they are looking at deploying patient-facing AI agents. So there is, and this is the case in US, in UK, and in Canada, anywhere between 150,000 to 300,000 workforce shortage in healthcare is coming up in the next 10 years. And because, so what companies are saying is, currently a doctor and a nurse spends half of their time doing non-clinical work. So they're beginning to now put front office agents for things like patient onboarding, doctor referrals and stuff, which are non-clinical activities. They want to start putting front office agents that can automate some of these systems. But they also want to make sure that these systems are not hallucinating, these systems are not leaking sensitive data, and these systems are not being hacked in. Some of you may know this, large language models, which is something that these agents orchestrate, they can understand Morse code. And we have seen people trying to send a Morse code to get a patient record out of these agents. And because they understand that language, humans don't, or not all the humans do. So things like that, how do you defend against these kinds of things when you're designing an agent? Do you know if your agent understands Morse code? Are you putting a shield in place to not be able to get manipulated with those things? Government procurement, one of the largest US government department has collaborated with us, where they're looking at 4,500 suppliers of theirs, and they have put a procurement workbook in place where they are now making them go through the controls to make sure that they're procuring data and models and AI systems in a responsible way. And we've also published, we're using agents ourselves to create this watchtower. I mean, it's all human in the loop, where a human reviews what the agent is coming up with. So we are publishing, news digests. We have this thing called RAI Rewind. There are over 800 standards and guidelines for AI globally. And it's not possible for people to understand that and stay on top of it. So we have launched this thing called a Watchtower agent, which people can subscribe to. It's free. You can go to responsible.ai, you can sign up for it, and it'll give you a news feed on what's going on in the world of responsible AI and keeps you up to date. The other thing we have done recently, as of March, is we've started offering badges. So whether you have a machine learning system or a Gen AI system or agentic AI systems, we have started giving badges for verification that your system and your company has that capability. And the badges are in three categories: governance and regulatory compliance, security and risk, and sustainability and cost. So the global leaders are people who are saying, I need to know about this, I need to build skills, and I also need external verification. And those are the four examples that I wanted to share with you across industries of what the leading companies are beginning to do. For me, this is, like I said, responsible AI is my life's work. This will be the business card that'll go in my coffin when I'm up and done. Because I think, I've made lots of money, I've had a lot of professional successes, and I'm very grateful for those. But I also feel that my grandkids are going to ask me and say, hey, well, how did you do this? Why did you not make sure that these were safe and beneficial? So I look at responsible AI as not just a job, but a duty for all of us. Future generations are going to ask us about this. And when we started this 9 years ago, I had to write down literally a definition of what responsible AI was. I remember going to World Economic Forum and saying, let's define what this thing means. But now what we are beginning to do is start leveraging standards like ISO, IEEE, BSI, and VDI from Germany and others, and start really incorporating that into this controls library. So we have, over the last 6 years, built 1,100 AI risk controls that are offered to our members as a way to, as a booklet, or it can be a runtime policy you can put into your agents. And we're very proud of the range of customers and members that we have had, because we are a nonprofit. We are a member-driven nonprofit that is on this mission to start helping companies understand and accelerate adoption. And what we do specifically, we help companies with providing tools for build, buy, and supply, trusted AI systems. And we give maturity assessments. We do system and product level verification. And like I said, we also provide co-branding opportunities so companies who have done it well can get the word out and get other people in their industry to start adopting it. The thing I would leave you with the thought is that this is not just something nice to have. Responsible AI has been proven to be profitable AI. At the end of the day, people also want to see business results and impact. It's not just soft and fuzzy stuff. 41% of leaders have said that they have actually started seeing hard business benefits from their responsible AI efforts. And my last slide before I wrap up is, as leaders, all of you on this call and your colleagues, your role is shifting dramatically from just architecting policies to runtime enforcement of these systems. Your standards, your own profession is moving from reviewing AI to helping design AI, watching how AI is unfolding to steering AI, and then not just suggesting oversight, but also operationalizing control of these things. And one of the things I'll say is that as a community, as a group, your role is shifting from not just influencing AI, but instrumenting AI. It's not just being on the sidelines, because these things are dynamic with a mind of their own. And you need to, I think, be ready to be able to step up and make this thing executable at runtime. So with that, if there are any questions, I'll take that. But again, I want to thank you all for the opportunity to share a few thoughts and scar tissue on, like I said, my life's work here, which is this nonprofit.
Great. Well, what an excellent overview of the responsible AI. I think we have some questions in the chat, so let's go and take some of those questions. The first question talks about if you can provide some more details about the process to conduct conformity assessment, testing, inspection, or certification on AI.
Yeah, so there are 3 levels of processes. So we have this controls, like I said, the 1,100 controls spanning 17 different regulations, and you can implement it in one of 3 ways. One, you can start looking at it as a yes, no, I did it or not did it, and we won't ask you for validation of it. So that's the simplest way. And I'm just going to put this up to give you a sense of what that looks like. These are these standards. When I say 1,100 controls, so there are ISO 42001, UK DCIT, OECD, to OASP on MITRE, and then ISO 21031 for cost and carbon. So we have a library of these controls, which you can use in one of 3 ways as a member. One, you would just use it as a checklist, and you say yes, no, and partial. And based on that, you get a number of points in an Excel thing that we do, and you have to score at least 70 points before you can say at least I've got a passing grade. That's one part. That's the lowest effort and the lowest quality, if you may. The second one is you would still go through the same thing, but we will ask you for proof of work. Out of the 75 controls, at 10 random places, we will ask you, show how did you do that? How did you calculate that bias metric? Without asking you to give us the sensitive data and the sensitive models, we will just do a spot check on your work to make sure that it is validated, that you truly are. Because what we are validating is not the output, we are validating the process. We are validating the process by which you're building these systems, not the quality of the output. That's up to you, the data and the model. So that's the second level, which is call it trust but verify. The third level is some of these controls, you can actually start putting it in runtime into your policy engines itself. So at runtime, your AI is being validated and assessed. So it starts with low, medium, and high, sort of a level of rigor. And depending on the quality and the risk profile of the AI, people tend to use one or more of these.
Great, thanks. There is another question on badges, and what's the basis for assigning those badges in terms of like what's the criteria, and do you audit to those criteria? I think partially you touched on that a little bit, but
Yeah. Yeah, so if you look at the badges again, part of the reason the badges are important is it lets you establish a foundation and then build on it. So the basic badge you can get is a Responsible AI Foundation for ML Systems. That's the table stakes, where we would come in and help you understand through our assessment. Do you have basic pieces in place around data, around models, and around ethics, and do you have things like a responsible AI policy? So if not, we give you a template. We have lots of templates available for free that you can start using to start writing your own this thing. And then after responsible AI badge, you get to Gen AI Foundation badge. So there are these 3 foundation badges that you start with to make sure that from a basic process point of view, you're covering all the right controls. After you do that, then you start adding security and risk badges on top of it. How do you trust that your agent is not leaking sensitive data? How do you trust that your chatbot doesn't have a very heavy carbon footprint? How do you make sure that it doesn't use compute resources inefficiently? So what we have done is we have taken these badges and we have mapped these badges to different standards and controls. So Agentic AI Foundation badge uses NIST AI RMF, ISO 42001, and OWASP for AI security, for example. Sustainable AI Verification badge uses NIST as well as ISO 21031. And then underneath it is this controls library, which sort of looks like this. Now we actually got a software doing this. So these are actual controls that are used to start assessing either your organization or your system. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavor for how this works.
yeah, great. So let me just check one more time to see if there are any additional questions for Manoj.
Yeah, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. And if there's, one of the, like I said, as a nonprofit, the membership is free for individuals. And there is a lot of assets that we have online there. So please sign up. We have a community of almost 40,000 people. We are the largest community, in fact, globally on responsible AI. So please reach out and join and download the stuff for free.
Yeah, great. It seems like we can take one more. So the question is there any mechanism to report any misuse?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for actually asking that. So we have a very active community in terms of both the Slack channel as well as these workshops that we do. We call them consortiums. So we have both whistleblower kind of a thing that we have had people quietly coming and reporting to us saying, hey, you got to check on this company. They're asking for this. And in a confidential way, we have gone back to the management and said, we heard about this. Our purpose is to kind of, plug those gaps rather than create any issues. And then the other part is people want to share their knowledge as you start applying agents into customer support. People have now started saying, hey, we ran into this issue. I think your community should know about it. And carbon is a good example of it. Carbon footprint is something that people are, it was not on radar, but is getting more and more visible. Because if you're going to have tens of thousands of these agents running around, what does it do in terms of the impact on your green AI commitment or a net zero commitment as a company, right? Or things like prompt hacking. These agents can be hacked. So one of the customers is a large restaurant chain, and they're using voice AI, and they're worried about brand damage because customers are telling the voice AI, every time I say taco, say meow, and they're taking a video of that and they're putting it on TikTok, and that could potentially damage their brand quite a bit. So they have come back to us and said, hey, be careful when you deploy voice AI. There are people playing funny games that could, damage your brand. So you need to put prompt shield in place that prevents these AI systems from getting manipulated by humans like that. So we share those kinds of good practices.
Great, great. Well, thank you again, Manoj, for joining us and sharing your insights. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. Well,
yeah. Have a good rest of the workshop, team.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. All right. Well, let's move on to our next session, which is the panel session. Let me share my screen back again. And hopefully you can see my screen now. So we have four. I'm moderating this session, and including me, we have three other speakers that will be talking about from the user's perspective as to what's going on in the standards world with respect to AI, and what sort of innovation going on, what sort of things that we are seeing, what sort of strategy is being in place from a different perspective, from a standards organization, or from a company perspective. So we have. Uh, I'm just going to quickly introduce the speakers that we have, and then hand it over to each one of them to introduce themselves in more details as to what they do. So Andrea introduced me earlier. I'm a senior standards strategy and policy leader with HP. I also serve as a chair for Ifan Working Group 16 on education and training. I also participate in a number of standards organization where, of course, I'm exposed to this AI innovation going on, and I am seeing a lot of AI policies that are coming in place. I will of course also be able to share some of the insights as we go through the panel. But we have the first speaker we have is Rohit Israni, who's the founder and CEO of Certian AI, and he's also the chair of the U.S. Mirror Committee to the International Standards Committee, which is called the ISO IEC JTC1 SC42 on artificial intelligence. So welcome, Rohit.
Thank you.
We have Hussain Hadi, who's the head of publishing at ISO. Thank you, Hussain. Welcome. And we have Denise Young Duran, who's the director and of engineering and data science at UL Standards and Engagement. So welcome, Denise.
Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, let's start with some introduction. So how about we start with Denise, yourself?
All right, and good morning, good evening, everyone. Again, I lead the data science and engineering team at UL Standards and Engagement. And what that means, in terms of this conversation that we're having in regards to AI, is our team has been charged with basically understanding what are the relevant hazards and harms associated with AI, for example. And not just AI, but those hazards and harms in general from a mechanical, electrical, electrification, safety standpoint. But specifically for AI, what we've been exploring is, what are the relevant AI hazards for products and technologies that our standards cover that are starting to integrate that technology. And so with that, we want to understand how our standards can respond to the integration of AI technology. And then we also want to look at various incidents as well. What are the types of incidents that we're seeing so that we can design standards that actually mitigate against the things that we're seeing as well. We are utilizing some generative AI, some more internal tools to help us assess data as well. A lot of our data comes from very public data sources, such as the Consumer Product Safety Commission. They have a national electronic injury surveillance system that we use to look at various incidents across the US, for example. There is an AI incident database that we also leverage as well. And that's really helping us to be more data-driven and inform our standards development process in ways where we can shape the standards around the types of incidents and around the types of hazards and harms that we're identifying as well. So that is our team. We have data scientists and a variety of disciplined engineers that make up the team. And our goal, again, is to make sure that our portfolio of standards, which is very diverse, covering everything from batteries and energy storage systems, even down to life jackets. But where AI and other hazards are being called out, we want to make sure that our standards are actually responding to those relevantly. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Denise. Next, we will go to Rohit.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rohit Israni, and I'm the founder of a responsible AI startup called Certian AI. I'm also the chair, as Ali mentioned, of the US Mirror Committee to SC42. And I've been involved in this effort right from the inception of this committee. And to give you a little introduction of this committee, we got formed towards the end of 2017, before the real big wave of AI and all the risks became very public information. But this work has been going on for several years. And the committee has all the international countries are involved in developing AI standards, and it's a horizontal standardization initiative in AI. That means it's applicable across verticals. And in the US, we have a mirror committee to this ISO IC committee, which I chair. And in the US, we have all the major companies, several of the foundational model companies, startups, academia involved in standardization. And as I mentioned again, this has been going on since 2017 and 18, essentially, when we had the first meeting in China. And the work of SC42 is really foundational to responsible AI in terms of us having standards. And again, in terms of officially having certification schemes, controls, uh, we've also released a standard that one can certify to. So it's actually the first AI governance standard that can be certified to that got released. It's foundational work for responsible AI that's been going on for the last 8 years. Thank you, Ali.
Great. Thanks, Rohit. And Hussein, next we'll go to you.
Thank you. I'm Hussein Hadi, Head of Publishing at ISO. And as you're probably aware, we publish around 1,500 standards a year. We have a portfolio of over 25,000 standards across a variety of industry sectors, including AI, my colleague here from SC42. And in terms of my team's responsibility, we're responsible for setting the editorial and digital policy for how we develop standards. So our style guide, directives part 1 and part 2, and of course, how we actually tag our XML. For example, we do our coding guidelines. So how do we make our standards more machine readable? The fuel for AI. So that's part of my team's responsibility, is setting the digital and editorial policy. We're also responsible for rolling out tools to help with standard development. One of the key ones is the online standards development platform, which is an XML first platform, which we have recently rolled out to encourage more structured authoring. And also in terms of AI usage with committees, I'm also the secretary of the ISO and IC Joint Task Force on AI Governance for Technical Committees, where we are encouraging responsible AI use in the standards development process. And as I'll talk about a little bit later, we're also looking at integrating AI tools into the standards development process.
Great, great. Thank you all for the introductions and sharing a little bit of insights as to what's going on within all of your organization with respect to AI. So let's start with talking about strategy for AI, and I'll start with Rohit. So Rohit, how do you really define the role of AI in the current standards development and implementation landscape?
So, Ali, that's a very important question. And Hussein alluded to some work that's been going on in ISO in terms of using AI, uh, in terms of developing standards and how AI could be used as a tool. This has to be done very thoughtfully because, again, you are developing responsible AI and you're developing standards for AI. So how you use AI has to be done very carefully. And so we're still at the initial phase of actually using AI in the development of standards, but there are several opportunities. The first thing I may also mention is that standards are copyrighted. These are copyrighted documents that are available for purchase. So training on a very large set of standards needs to have certain directions, which hopefully ISO will release at some point of time. But it is one more of the challenges in terms of having AI being trained on standards. But in terms of areas, I have kind of come up with 6 possible steps where there is opportunities of really using AI. First being the committees are international in nature. So one of the challenges that's been a problem is that several countries may not have English as their first language. And we've always seen a barrier where, people who don't have English as a barrier when they're contributing to standards, there is a challenge that they face in terms of articulating their thoughts. And in that area, LLMs do help in terms of helping non-native speakers of English to formulate and write, clearer sentences and clearer paragraphs, and that certainly is a very valuable tool. And it's being used by people, as they submit comments in their drafts. The second thing is streamlining the editorial process. And again, here too, this needs to be officially as a directive and a policy how this could be done. But there's a great opportunity here. When standards are reviewed, and this is a process that spans more than a couple of years, sometimes 3 to 4 years, and a very large number of editorial comments come up at every stage. In fact, almost 80% are editorial. And that's another place where the use of LLMs can streamline that and can reduce editorial, friction. And the third thing is, creating crosswalks between documents. And, there's a lot of overlapping document, a lot of fragmentation. And I think Manoj alluded to some of this. There's a very large number of standard development organizations. There's a NIST AI RMF, there's 42001, and there's often a need for crosswalks between these. And that's another place where AI and LLMs can give you the first draft of what a crosswalk could look like very quickly. But again, needs to be human reviewed and tested and validated. But that's another place where AI can really shorten what would take multiple day effort into a few hours of work. Then analyzing gaps in future needs. This is another place where AI can play a role, looking at trends and suggesting areas where there are not existing standards. Operational efficiency. We're often scheduling meetings at odd times, and meetings are scheduled often with different countries, and that's a place where AI tools in terms of meeting scheduling and admin tasks can be very helpful. And then the last one is more around the implementation, right? How AI could be used as co-pilots when folks are implementing standards. And that's a place where, again, there's a lot of opportunity. But I'm sure we'll hear more from Hussein around, what ISO thinking is around the use of AI in standards. But I certainly happy to define at least these 6 areas where AI could be very beneficial more as a co-pilot.
Yeah, great. So to follow up on that, Hussein, why don't you share with us the ISO strategy on AI overall, and what are some of the initiatives that ISO is working on, either in just short term or long term?
No, thank you, and a great foundation to build on from my co-panelists there. The first thing to say is that we have put in place an AI strategic framework, and we're looking at the implications of AI across the standard development process. We define upstream as the actual standard development part, midstream where we publish the standard, and downstream conformity assessment and applications there. I'm going to focus more on the upstream side of things. So in terms of one of the first things we had to do over the last few years was come up with an AI usage guide for responsible AI use. So we've actually published that. You can go to the publicly available ISO drafting page and have a look at that. So that was published earlier this year with do's and don'ts, general principles, very much linked to our current code of conduct, providing guidance for responsible AI use with ISO committees. And I would say it's fair to say that this is going to be a living document, and the first version of it, I would say, is cautious in the sense that we recognize the potential of AI as some of the use cases, but we're very cautious when it comes to freely available versions of AI tools. We don't want our copyright to be uploaded into these tools. We don't want to use text generated by these tools in our standards. But in terms of allowable use cases, we strongly encourage AI to be used for monitoring specific sources, for brainstorming. You could use tools such as Elicit, Site.ai, ResearchRabbit to stay on top of a particular industry field. You could use something like Feedly to monitor different sources and give you a summary of what's the latest developments there. You could use it to draft an email as long as there's no sensitive information in there. You could use it to prepare meeting notes for a minute, as long as you do that in accordance with the directives part 2, that should be done by an officer and used for a specific purpose. So there are clear use cases that are allowed by the usage guide, but one of the things that we will do in the next version of the guide is to perhaps have more flexibility where enterprise license tools are used. So if one of our members has licensed a tool, has done their due diligence, and has ensured that all the data protection, the security is done there in procuring that tool, and it's being done in a responsible way, we could envisage allowing more opportunities to draft responsibly. In terms of testing that we are doing within the ISO system, similar to what was said earlier, we're very much prioritizing translation. We see that as a key use case to help people understand standards that they're working on. So looking at opportunities to include translation tools, summary tools as well. One thing we are testing at the moment, and I'm happy to share the link to that, is we are testing what we call the ISO Companion, which is a chatbot where you can ask questions about ISO processes, ISO rules, and it has a narrow focus in that sense, but it very much help you navigate the ISO drafting ecosystem when it comes to rules and processes. So that's very much a new tool that we're in the beta. We're beta testing at the moment. We're inviting people to take part in that, and that's where you can ask questions about standards development. But certainly, as I said, use cases, translation, summary, we definitely see that as helpful. And I think one thing that, you can easily talk about AI tools, but I would like to talk about how we prepare our content, our data for AI tools. And that's actually just as important. How do we make sure that, as was mentioned earlier, we draft in a way that enables AI tools to work efficiently and to make our standards more machine readable? So one thing we've added to our style guide is a checklist for drafting digitally ready documents. That was partially inspired by SAE International, Leslie Mackay, who did their version. We've actually incorporated a version into our style guide, and we've launched the Online Standards Development Platform, which is an XML-first platform for structured authoring. And using the platform, thinking about how we draft can ensure that we're drafting in a more consistent way that makes our content more machine readable and more easy to apply for end users. So I would say that we're looking at guidance for committees, testing tools, as was mentioned earlier in the standards development process, and thinking about how we actually draft and make our content more discoverable, more machine readable.
Great, thanks, Hussein. And Denise, you mentioned earlier about Gen AI and the use of Gen AI. So how is UL trying to leverage Gen AI, and are you able to share some of the current initiatives?
Absolutely. And, what I'll focus on today is our current, practices for utilizing generative AI from a data science perspective. But I also want to share a little bit about how that is influencing our standards development process. Currently, the generative AI tools that we use are custom built by our data science team. And so they are not external tools because we, again, to Manoj's point earlier, we want to make sure that this new approach to AI is done safely and responsibly. And so the approach that we use right now definitely takes into account bringing, specific assets into our own Azure environment to, again, ensure that things aren't leaked and to ensure that where we use our standards, as collateral within that large language model, that it is not, shared publicly. And so with that, we're able to do some really cool things as a data science team to help inform our standards development process. So when we think about, the input into a draft standard, for example, one of the things that we've done is identify the relevant hazards. So we will basically conduct a hazard analysis. And in the space of, products and technologies that are utilizing AI, we want to understand, how hallucination, how bias and transparency from an AI standpoint impact these products from a hazard and harm perspective. And then from there, we're able to map out, what are these specific risks, and then how a standard can respond to that via the standards content, whether it be the glossary terms, the design requirements, the construction requirements, even down to the test methodologies. That is allowing us to also have some consistency across our documents as well. One of my challenges sometimes with standards in our portfolio specifically is where there may be a definition or a test methodology that is, different across multiple standards. And so we do want to align those things a little bit better. And our generative AI tools are allowing us to do that. But specifically to the process that our data science team uses, I also wanted to speak to how we're utilizing generative AI from a writing assistant standpoint. We're able to compare, documents, again, in our own Azure environment utilizing stateless models that aren't necessarily saving, but still learning about the prompts that are being entered. And it's important that these prompts are very specific so that the outputs are accurate and can be used in a reliable way. So writing assistance is an area that we're utilizing generative AI internally, of course, and then the process also includes a human in the loop approach as well, which Manoj spoke to as well earlier. That ensures, from a data science and engineering perspective, that we have some verification and validation along the way to ensure accuracy as well. The other area that we're using generative AI for is in the area of summarization and extraction. So I spoke earlier about, publicly available incident data that's available. We're able to pull those reports into our own Azure environment and extract test parameters and standard references, learn more about the different hazards and harms that are relevant to different products and technologies, and then make decisions or have that information available for technical committees to utilize throughout the process. And then the last area is classification. For many of our standards, we want to understand what are the relevant hazards, what hazards are most prevalent across our portfolio. So we're able to utilize generative AI to scan across our portfolio to understand what are the relevant mechanical hazards, what are the relevant electrical hazards. And then from an AI standpoint, how does hallucination, for example, impact the electrical safety, the mechanical safety of a product? Even down to, from a classification standpoint, we're able to leverage generative AI for ICS codes and SDG recommendations, SDGs specifically for sustainable development goals. And instead of manually, determining what the relevant ICS or SDG code is, we have built models that can basically on an on-demand platform provide that information to our stakeholders. The validation comes in place when we present that information to our technical committees, to our engineers, or to our internal standards development team members to ensure that that information is verified, refined, and validated since it was generated utilizing generative AI. And that helps us ensure the accuracy. And again, it applies that human in the loop validation. So those are some of the ways that our data science team has been able to leverage generative AI. In the future, we're looking at how we can make those things more publicly available. But for now, these are also all some of the internal assets that we're using to support our technical committees.
That's great, Denise, and that's awesome. That's a lot of tools and resources that you're making it available. So, talking about some of those tools and initiatives that you all have mentioned, and thinking more about from the perspective of a standards organization, each one of you represent a standards organization. So thinking from that perspective and of course, listening to Manoj this morning, what do you think is the role of a standards body in shaping the responsible use of AI in this space? As you roll out these initiatives, how are you thinking at the organization level in ensuring that you are indeed rolling out these initiatives responsibly?
So I can go first, perhaps.
Sure.
So I think Manoj actually set the stage very well for how standards could play a role, and in terms of the work of SC42, we actually did publish what is perhaps the first certifiable international standard for responsible AI or for AI governance called ISO 42001, which is an AI management system standard. And as several of the questions came up post the initial keynote, this standard does comprise all the other components of what is needed to get certified for a company to actually show that they are following a certain set of internationally approved processes in terms of their management system. So it's a management system standard, which is accompanied by a standard on risk management. There's also a standard on impact assessment, which allows you to do, an impact of AI across multi-dimensions. There's also a governance standard for, how audit committee or the executive committee of a company should look at their responsibilities in terms of policy settings. And there's a standard for auditors who will have the job of actually issuing certificates. And that also just got released recently, which would be basically having what is the criteria, what exactly would the auditors need to do. So it's a comprehensive set of standards along with the management system standard, which is called 42001. It also has a set of predefined controls. Of course, you could add more controls, and there are methods defined in the standard in terms of the controls you could select and have a statement of applicability. So it's overall, from an ISO's perspective, and in fact from any international standardization organization perspective, the first certifiable AI governance or AI management system standard. And I think that is one of the key parts of what will be moving forward the responsible AI strategy for companies.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Rohit. And certainly those standards 42001 and the recently released 42005 and 6 are really important in shaping the responsible AI practices. So Hussein, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I think international collaboration is key here. What we don't want is duplication of efforts and unnecessary overlap. So with that in mind, I want to highlight a few areas. As standards organizations, it's important that we work together. So an example of that is ISO, IC, and ITU have a joint initiative on AI and multimedia authenticity in standards collaboration. That's an area that we launched at the AI for Good conference that is happening in Geneva this week, in fact. So if anyone's around, hopefully I'll see you there. So that collaboration is key, and that's going to actually culminate in the International AI Standards Summit, which is taking place in Korea from the 2nd to the 3rd of December this year. So those are two examples of the need to make sure that we are speaking to each other and we aren't doing it in isolation. And I think one of the things as standards developers, we have to be mindful of the complexity of people navigating in a fast-moving field. The technology is moving so fast, and there's so much discussions going on. It can be quite intimidating. And I think one of the reasons why I think ISO 42001, as was mentioned by Rohit, is very useful is that it's a management system standard, and it's linked to and built on other management system standards like 27001 on cybersecurity, 9001 for generic management. So you're already part of the way there if you're embedding that culture, that way of working in a structured way, of putting the right systems in place, because you can't hope to outrun the speed of AI development. But what you can do is create that culture and put in those systems in place to monitor and have the right governance. So I would say the key thing is to be mindful of the broader ecosystem. Standards is one piece of the puzzle, to collaborate with other organizations and to be aware of our place there. So hopefully these joint initiatives, these events we're taking place in, and these standards will enable people to move ahead in a responsible way.
Great, thanks, Hussein. Next, Denise.
Well, I'll start by saying I 100% agree with all of my panelists here. And I think what I would add additionally is, with the innovation that we're seeing with AI, I think the role of standards development organizations is really putting some guardrails in place, but also enabling this innovation to really kind of guide the future, because we see huge benefits from the use and the integration of AI, but we want to, again, do it safely and responsibly. So when it comes to, guiding this innovation with guardrails, the collaboration is so important. And the collaboration among standards development organizations, and not just, other technical organizations or manufacturers, for example, who are integrating this into their products. And in doing so, we can do things like defining what those technical benchmarks look like. What are the interoperability protocols, for example? What are the risk management frameworks, like ISO, for example, that we can pull into some of our existing standards development practices, for example, and existing standards. And then that will really allow, in my opinion, innovation to really flourish without, compromising the innovation itself. And the other thing that I'll speak to is just enabling AI responsibly. Some of the work that we're doing internally is really testing the waters with how AI can really benefit standards development practices. The hazard, understanding what those hazards and harms are, but then also leveraging some of these tools to speed up the processes, to make things more efficient, and to harmonize globally as well. And so, again, 100% agree with my other panelists here. But from a ULSE perspective, those are some of the areas that we are focused on. Thank you.
Great. So, I think, each one of you mentioned a number of initiatives that you guys are leading and looking forward to, implementing it later on in the long term. What are some of the challenges that you are facing in trying to work on those and trying to implement those initiatives? And what are some of the opportunities that you see, not just for standardization community, but overall in trying to integrate AI in standards development, as well as standards implementation?
So I think the first thing, perhaps, I think Hussein alluded to this, as did Denise, is there's a huge challenge with respect to how the speed of innovation and the standards process is a slower process than what innovation we are seeing in AI. As an example, we had certain set of standards initially, and in 2023, we suddenly had in January a vast explosion of LLMs and ChatGPT, where all of a sudden we had to think about generative AI and how would one include that in the standardization effort. So it's always trying to catch up in terms of making sure standards are being developed and the technology is kind of moving so fast. The other thing also I think got alluded to by both Hussein and Denise is the fragmentation. Perhaps Hussein alluded to it more. There's a very large number of standards being developed, and there's also a need for avoiding overlap and us working collaboratively with other standard development organizations. And so there's a real opportunity there for liaisons, and there's the joint workshop that Hussein mentioned that's happening between ISO, IC, and ITU, and between other standardization organizations. With SC42, there's a very large number of liaisons that SC42 chair, Weil, has really focused on establishing. So we are trying to get more and more people aligned and on the common page and harmonizing efforts across the globe. The third thing is, I think, regulations. There has been desire for regulators to use standards, as we've seen in the EU AI Act, and we've also seen several US states who have had AI regulations. And again, sometimes it's expected that standards help enable those regulations, and the standards may be released at a different timing versus when the regulations are released. So as a tool, this is sometimes a challenge to make sure regulations and standards work together. This is certainly something that the EU is facing. Just a lack of trained personnel, that's another major issue. Even in terms of the kind of skills needed for several parts of what could be very complex systems, to either audit them or to implement standards, it does require trained personnel who understand the technology, understand processes, understand standards. So there is certainly a lack of trained personnel. And the last thing that is, I think, an ongoing challenge for AI really is around data quality and associated usage in terms of data being, not copyrighted, what it's been trained on with models, and that is another challenge that I may allude to.
Yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely. Thank you. Hussein or Denise, who wants to go next?
I can go next. What I'll say is I'll add to Rohit in terms of, from an AI standpoint, the innovation is a major hurdle. Our traditional standards development processes, can be outpaced by AI technologies from what we're seeing. And then I think another, challenge is just this lack of shared language and frameworks. So understanding these AI hazards and harms, we know that terms like fairness and explainability mean different things in different contexts, or it can be applied in different ways depending on whether it's a tool or a deliverable like an AI generated paper versus, how that AI technology is integrated into a product, for example. And so without consensus, it's really difficult to create standards that are both technically sound and ethically grounded. I also think to Rohit's point, we face a lot with data and model opacity. So many of these AI systems, they're black boxes. And so proprietary constraints can limit transparency. And that makes it very difficult to verify whether those systems actually comply with emerging standards. And then lastly, from a product technology standpoint, what we're seeing is, just with the integration of AI is such a powerful tool that's driving innovation to the point where, you can utilize machine learning approaches to predict, battery thermal runaway 24 to 48 hours before its occurrence. That's huge because in the past, what we've seen from a battery management standpoint is that they actually respond to, those conditions after they become dangerous. But machine learning and the introduction of those, AI related approaches is really helping to show where, there's promise in predicting the evolution of battery health. So there's so many benefits that really, we need to balance with just the challenges and the known risk associated with AI. So I think that is a challenge in itself to balance, the risk and the rewards, because we know that this innovation is continuing to drive forward in many of the types of products and technologies that our standards cover. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Very much agree with that. And I think one thing I'll pick up on is the digital divide and making sure that everyone actually knows what we're talking about here. So I think one of the things to highlight with SC42, for example, is our foundational standards. So for example, we have ISO IC 22989 on AI concepts and terminology. That's freely available. Anyone can download that just to get clarity on how we define that. We've got other foundational standards like AI use cases. That's 24030. So those are kind of foundational standards to help with that. But when it comes to actually helping people understand where we are and what we're doing, I would also highlight that SC42 has publicly available information sessions, usually on a quarterly basis. Anyone can join, and that brings together people from the industry and from various stakeholders to discuss where we are in specific areas like healthcare, like media and AI. So I would encourage people to get involved by joining those, looking at those foundational standards. But we need to be mindful here that, and as was discussed here, when you're talking about the free version of an AI tool, there's a lot of risk there. There's a lot of issues about copyright, and not everyone can afford to have access to a secure tool. And that's why one of the challenges we have is if we're going to be building licensing tools that are within our ecosystem that's safe, there is a cost implication there, and we have to make sure that we're putting our investment in the right place. But I go back to those key use cases that we talked about. If we want everyone to be involved, I really feel there's a strong use case for translation, helping people understand, using tools to project manage more effectively, using tools in meetings to, one of the pilots we're really focusing on is live translation tool, during meetings, generating meeting minutes as well. So I think that's important. So helping the digital divide, helping people understand and be aware, and facing the challenge of making AI tools available in a responsible way, bearing in mind resource restraints.
Great insights. Yep. Thank you. So we are moving into our live Q&A session. So please feel free to submit your questions into the chat. We do have one question that has been submitted so far. And the question is, are there any initiatives currently underway to promote responsible AI in education? I'm particularly concerned about raising a generation of AI savvy students who may lack the critical understanding needed to discern ethical boundaries, risk, and appropriate use. So who wants to take that one?
I think it's a really good question. I think it's a really good question. I think this is what Elizabeth is mentioning is a real need. And I think we need more initiatives to educate people around responsible AI use. I mean, in schools, especially, in classes that are more of the formative years. I mean, I can just imagine thinking of, like my grandfather, he could do calculations without having to use a calculator. And it's a skill that didn't come over to me. Now, I just think about it that the way we're using a lot of the LLMs today in terms of formulating and writing, would would the next generation perhaps lose some of these skills? That's really a question. What age should they be allowed to use, so to say, AI for writing and doing homeworks, for example? And the second thing, the risks associated with the kind of content and the answers that AI gives, and how these are real, very important area in terms of responsible use of AI in children. I think more needs to be done on it.
I 100% agree. And I would say, there are some available resources out there that while they don't speak, directly to, some of the points that Rohit just made from an education standpoint, they do a great job of identifying, for example, what are the risks associated with AI and how, a risk management framework, for example, what NIST has provided and made publicly available can be leveraged to help educate students and even faculty on how to leverage and utilize and apply AI in a safe and responsible way.
Yeah, and I will just add to that as well. We have HP Life program that is available for free for anybody. It has free courses on AI for teachers as well as for students to learn more about AI. I know that AI Education Pledge was recently introduced by White House, and a number of companies signed up to become a member of that to leverage their content. That is also going to help out teachers to promote a lot of this AI content and get this AI content in the hands of students so they can really prepare that next generation to leverage AI. And I saw a hand up from the attendees side, which I don't see it at the moment anymore. If you have any questions, yeah, please raise your hand or just submit it into the chat. I can either unmute you or we can read your question. Okay, so while people are thinking about other questions, one of the things that I was thinking about while you were talking about all these initiatives is that, what sort of skill set does a standards participant need to have in order to be able to even make great use out of all these resources, such as, Hussein, you mentioned ISO AI Companion, and Denise, you were mentioning a lot of these tools for Gen AI. From your perspective, do you envision like some sort of a skill set that standards participant uh, needs to be able to have in order to understand and utilize these resources effectively?
Yeah, I'll definitely say for many of the tools that we've developed and we're, developing with the user in mind, we want to make sure that it's as user-friendly and intuitive as possible. And so, when I think about, some of the classification tools that we've developed, the first thing that we want to do is ensure that the prompt is clear so that the output can be as accurate as possible. And so the prompts in many cases would be things like, what is the standard title or what is the scope of the standard? And that is an input that can be provided. And then on the back end, the model will do the work of comparing and summarizing the information, again, in the most accurate way. So we've really, focused on the inputs and how the user can ensure that, and how we can ensure that the user doesn't have to worry about, having a specific skill set to interact with these tools. Now, as we move forward, we know that that's going to, potentially change because some of these tools are going to become a little bit more complex. But I think that comes with the guidance that we would provide in how to utilize these tools effectively. So simple things like, making sure that the prompt is very clear, making sure that the prompt, drives the output versus, the output being so broad that, the user has to then comprehend what is actually being provided at the end. So I'll say based on the tools that we have right now, it's a very simple input and output, but, we had that in mind when we think about various users and what they may be accustomed to from like a public AI tool standpoint, whether it's Gemini or Copilot, for example.
Great. I don't see any other questions in the chat. or raised hands. So with that, I would like to just thank all of you for your time and sharing your insights and sharing, initiatives from your organization. And we look forward to engaging more as many of those initiatives come out. So looking forward to all of them.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Oli.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All
everyone.
right. Have a good one.
All right. Well, with that, let's move on to our next session, which is the AI Lab, which is the use cases for standards users. And you heard a lot about these initiatives from our panelists just now. Each one of these speakers are going to talk about a practical use case that you can look into to learn more about and experiment with AI. So the first speaker we have is Vandana Sharma. She's a Senior Director of Outcomes and Solution from InfoBeans. And I'll let Vandana introduce herself more and hand it over to her.
Thank you so much, Ali. This has been a great, great morning. What great learnings. Thank you, everybody, for those great insights. I've been working in the technical side for almost 25 years now, but I started my career for 17 years. I was an architect, and as an architect, I was a consumer of standards and always struggling to find the right information and what is applicable for which building type, and how does my design impact the different trades like HVAC and plumbing standards and structural. Any building design changes, what were those impacts? So I would always be struggling in the libraries and between the big books to find the right sections. And in 2008, the economic downturn led me to this role where I'm now bridging the gap between the creator and the consumer. So I work with a team of incredible digital solution designers, and we listen, we make and test and deploy some really powerful software solutions for the people that we serve. And I'm very excited to share our approach to making great AI-enabled solutions with all of you today. Can I start sharing my screen, Ali? Or
yeah, sure. I'm going to stop sharing so you can start sharing your screen.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we can see it now.
Awesome. So just a little bit about us, InfoBeans. I think some of you I have already met at some of the conferences. You might have seen us at those conferences, specifically WSW and SES. We are a global digital transformation company. We design, build, and manage digital applications. And our mission is to do really meaningful work for our people and create long-term value for our entire ecosystem of clients, of our teams, our partners. And we focus on human-centered design, which is the approach that we take in every project that we do. We were born about 25 years ago, and we are an ISO IEC 27001 2013 certified. Recently, we got the CMMI Level 5 certification. We are a GDPR compliant organization. And for the past 15 years out of the 25, we've had the privilege of partnering with some of the world's largest SDOs, delivering enterprise scale solutions across web, cloud, mobile, different platforms. And these days, we are actually looking at a lot of work and actually doing a lot of work on AI and helping organizations accelerate or jumpstart their AI initiatives. This is some of the work we've done specifically for the STO industry. And we've seen how it has evolved from where it was, from the handwritten ledgers to unreadable scanned images. We had to, we were requiring those manual fixes. We were there when all of that was happening. And then the searchable PDFs came, and now to the native digital formats like HTML and smart documents with real-time updates and automations. And of course, today we are learning how AI can unlock the immense possibilities for value generation. But on this slide is what we've done in the past. So today we are hearing in the area of AI, this is all the stuff that we are hearing. What all the leaders are talking about these challenges, and they are hearing about all these amazing returns that everybody else is getting, but they don't know where to start and they don't see anything yet. So how do we use AI and how do we even begin? These are all the concerns. They're about InfoSec and regulatory aspects that we just talked about as well. So how do we look at this, and what are some of the approaches that we can take to make AI a little bit consumable and start in that direction at least? These are some of the challenges that we see for the last few years. And the first one is the trust. How do we begin to trust the data, and how do we even begin to build the trust? And I think people start looking at the trust that on the day one, but it is actually to be built systematically. Without the trust, even the best AI solution will not get any buy-in or any user adoption. So I'll go through some of the things that we do to build that trust in the AI-driven products. And then when it comes to data, there is a misconception that everybody has to have a perfect data, that, oh, we are not ready with the data, we still have a lot to do, and we never have the perfect data. But the fact is that you need to focus on the right problems. The data will never be perfect. And too many companies are getting stuck waiting for the data that they will never have, instead of aligning their efforts with achievable high impact goals, for which the data can be curated and smaller data sets can be utilized. And another reason why AI projects often fail is because their ROI is not clear upfront or is measured too soon or too late. This is one of the biggest mistakes, where organizations are focusing on technologies first and not the long-term value. So without a clear ROI, it is impossible to justify the investment or even know if you're succeeding. So in order to handle all of this, we have discovered something powerful, that when you take a design-led approach, you can overcome these barriers. It has helped companies to go from idea to real-world impact faster. So because all of these things that we see are not technical problems, they are actually design problems and business and people problems. And that's what we need to focus on. This is how we actually get to the right use case, and how do we identify what needs to happen first, and how can we make the people and the data ready for something simple. And how do you do that? We actually have, on the one axis, we have the business value. On the other axis, we have the outcome velocity. And which means that when people are ready for AI, are people ready for AI? In which department can we test these? And how good is the data around that system? Where do we have updated data? Where we have the right quality of data? We can actually start right there. And those could be the first opportunities to test out the use cases. Here is one example of how we mapped out the business goal to the use case. And I'm going to show you just in a minute that particular tool, but the exercise that we did before that tool was exactly this. So our AI business case workshops start with this. With any organization, we pick one or two business goals. And in this case, we started with a goal of a quick, accurate answer finder. We've already talked about, Hussein touched upon that, and a couple of the people also, that how that could be one use case where the goal is that, let's see if we can deliver quick, accurate answers to the users on large documents. Who are the actors? And we identify those actors. How do they impact how can they positively or negatively impact the outcomes? And how is the business visibility for these people? Then we come out with some of the AI use case kind of like mapping it out through that and then tying it back to the business goal. And we do this in our starting workshops with any organizations. We come up with like 2 or 3 business goals, and then we open it up like this, that, okay, who are the actors? What do they want to do to create a positive impact, or what could be the negative impacts? And then come out with one or two AI use cases, and then we kind of go around the room and do like a round robin. We score these AI use cases and then pick the ones with the highest scores and then run with it. So now let me show you how we actually created a tool based on this particular use case. I'll have to see how can I switch my screen. Sorry, I'll have to stop this one and start the other one. I don't know how to do that. 1 second. Okay, here it is. Can you see the next screen with the exponent?
Yes.
Awesome. Just give me a second here. Okay, so oh, here it is. So let's look at all of this theory that I just talked about into action. So we designed and developed this AI solution, which resulted from the use case discovery workshop, as we shared. It is a smart RAG-based solution where you can actually interact with your technical standards and files or anything that you want to interact with in a very crisp design NLP-based solution and interface, which is what you see here. So you have on the right-hand side, you have all your documents. You can actually categorize them and upload them. This is all your knowledge base. So all your data, proprietary data. There is nothing open source here. And then on the other side of the screen, you have your conversations, you have your logins, and that's exactly, this is it. Very, very simple. So what you do here is it acts like your smart personal assistant that understands your unique data sets. It learns continuously from your inputs and uses the GPT 4.0 with RAG-based engine to deliver fast, relevant, and context-aware answers. So when a user asks a question, let's try that once. Let's say I'm gonna put a question here. And see. So I'm putting a question, what documentation is required for compliance with ventilation standards? Okay, just a second, I think it logged out. So now it's sifting through the whole database to see what document in the database has a relevant answer. And how does it do that? We have all the data is actually broken up into indexed factor data now and pulling only the most relevant pieces from the files, and then it summarizes and rephrases the content, which is essentially transforming the robotic system response to a more human-friendly answer. And this makes it much faster and accurate to navigate what you're looking for in a standard. So this is what it spit out. It also actually breaks it down, organizes the content, and then gives you all the relevant information for what needs to happen for the design documentation, what needs to happen for the ventilation system documentation. And it also gives you the links of where it is pulling that information as well. And you can actually open these into different screens. So it actually goes to the different screen. I don't think you can see that other screen, but you can actually link on these documentation to jump onto those. Let's try one more to see what else can it do. So for example, I'm a manufacturer of HVAC equipment, and I'm just writing as a manufacturer, should we maintain air balance report? I don't know if I should, or I know I shouldn't. So I'm just asking the question here. And it's giving me a very concise summary of what, why is it, yes, as a manufacturer, it is essential, and where does it specify? So it points out to that standard. And in the future, we are also looking to do like citations of the page numbers for where this stuff is written, so that people can go back to the full standard and do the tally it up. And here you can also have, like, all of these standards are available for previews. So you can cross-reference and see, okay, this is the question, this is the answer, this is the page number. And so there's always a human in the loop to always override anything that is what they think is the right thing. And another thing that we are doing is also picking out the images, like what are the how can it read images? So for example, in this downloads, I have some other documents also which are not standards, but some other standards, I mean, some other documents which have images where I'm asking these questions: what type of common skin diseases do we have? And so it's going to go and look for images. And we are working on something else, which is the equation reading as well. So we are looking at the other features, so that there are technical information in the standards and how can the equations become more readable. So let's look at this question where I'm saying, how was a particular equation was updated, and what additional information was added in the latest version of that. So it's actually sifting through all of the database that I have and then looking at which document has this equation. And it's actually giving me that equation with all of the other information that pertains to that particular question. So over time, like it learns on its own on your data sets. And I think it's a great tool for the internal staff members, as well as your users, as well as technicians on the site. We are also looking to do a voice enablement for this tool, and also translation. All the stuff that people were talking about today, we are looking at kind of making those kind of feature enhancements in the future for this tool as we go. So let me jump back on the presentation again. Are you able to see back this seeing in action Exponent? I'm not sure because I cannot see that screen. One second. Share. Yes. Okay.
I'm not. We're seeing a screen that says "Seeing it in action" Exponent demo.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Where? Yeah. So essentially, what can organizations do to make AI projects successful is have a phased approach and de-risk, the trust and the ROI. And how do we do that? How do we do de-risk trust, data, and the cost, which boils down to, again, coming down with a good, impactful use case? Because what happens is the first phase, if you do that good use case, which is everybody has bought into that use case, everybody can see and measure that impact, that is the first step. And in the middle phase, then what happens is that You chunk out a lot of rapid prototyping, you do a lot of experimenting and testing with the real users, you pick out a lot of quantitative and qualitative data learnings, and ultimately launch something that you feel that you're comfortable with. You can't really launch something that is half-baked in the AI world, as we all know, because then nobody is going to trust that. Nobody is going to have a proper adoption of that tool. So we have to think about setting things up right with privacy in mind, and that will build the trust, the privacy. And then we continue to monitor, observe, and think how we can continue to give humans the ability to override. So that's a very big factor in making any AI initiative successful. So these are some of the secrets that we feel secrets to success for AI to really take off in a lot of organizations that we work with. And we also do our workshops. We are offering these workshops to, with quick discovery workshops for organizations where these are the activities that we take on right from the starting, from the data prep for the business goals to AI architecture, prioritizing the features for the POC stage, and for each of the personas, mapping the value generation back to the business goal, and then ideating the next stages of continued value generation so everyone involved can really measure that ROI over time. And we have to really be careful in letting people know that this is a model that gets trained over time. So the ROI should not be measured too soon. So people have to be aware of that. So there's a lot of training that has to go for the teams because everybody is very used to instant results, which should not be the case. So we have to kind of keep that in mind. I have some other use cases here, but that's not an STO use case, but I thought this would be interesting for us to see as well. Do we have some more time, Ali? Are we good with that? Like 5 more minutes?
So, sorry, I was on mute. Yes, absolutely. We have more time. You can take 5 to 10 minutes. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. So this is one of the projects that we did with both Google and PwC, where we brought in to work with we were brought in to work with the field services project. And we were there to think about how do we bring PwC's consultative expertise and pair it with Google's platform expertise. So we started to think about how could we use AI to make our project more valuable. So what happened here is that we brought a lot of we were brought to see how where are the gaps that were happening between a dispatcher of equipment to do some kind of installations on site, and where were the gaps, how were they doing, where were they missing things, where were the return trips happening, some of the failures were happening. So we came in and we started to bunch our site results, our on-site research. So what happened is our teams were actually paired with dispatchers to make the trips, to understand what is their actual workflow from day in to day out, and map out that process flow of their experience with the tools that they used. And most of the times they were doing all the work manually. So we started to notice that everything was on paper. They were not able to feed in the customer feedback because this is how they were working for 40 years. And they didn't see any reason to change. So we now had to bring in a tool which we wanted them to trust. And they worried about also losing their jobs as we were bringing some tools, as we were talking to bringing a tool of AI. So what we did is we actually made a business plan, and we started to explain everybody that, look, these are the impacts that everybody will see throughout this. Everybody from this team will see if we were to put an AI proposed solution. So the customers won't be upset when something is broken, and we proposed a solution with a pretty big ROI in 2 years, which mapped out the risks out front. And the results in the end were the scheduling tool that we were about to build had very fast permutations, and it spitted out the recommendations to the field engineers for the scheduling. And we also showed the teams the reasoning behind, Denise mentioned, the black box. So really opening that up, that what are the rules that we have put in the engine? What are some of the, like, how is it thinking? And that gave the team a lot of confidence in trusting that particular tool and trusting the recommendations, to see how the engine is working, how it is recommending. And we could also input some of the feedback that we learned from the use of the first few experimentation. And so the people felt that their needs were met, and their feedback was actually utilized in building the next phases of the tool. And the tool always, we had that in the design, the opportunity for the teams to override the system recommendations. So they felt in control at all times. And these were the results, 10 times faster schedules. A lot of that also freed up a lot of the time for the dispatchers to talk to the customers and to really make that relationship and pick up their feedback. And then leveraging their time into more valuable activities rather than scheduling and doing stuff that they were always doing for that long. So these are some of the things that we do on our website. You will see all of this that we are doing to help organizations get started with their AI journeys, with their, whatever they're doing, wherever they're stuck. This is what they can do. So we are offering AI use case workshops for the last almost a year. Let us know if we can help with any initiatives or accelerate them. And this is just a little bit about us. And that's all I have for today.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Vandana. And this is great. I see a chat. Oh, okay. If you want to send this message, Vandana, that you send to everybody, it can be shared, or I can share it for you. Seems
Yeah.
like it only went to the host and the panelists, so I can post it on your
Okay.
behalf.
Thank you.
All right. Well, in terms of the questions, we will take questions at the end when we finish all of the presentations. So the next one we will be moving forward to is David. Let me just go ahead and okay. Vandana, it looks like you're still sharing your screen.
Sorry. Okay, I'm actually on this. Yeah, there it is.
Okay, let me go ahead and yeah. So the next speaker we have is David Tesses. David, help me pronounce your last name.
David Cipiduk.
Okay, great. Yeah, and he is the Associate Director of Growth at Get More Brain, and I will let him introduce himself.
Great. Thank you, Ali. Yeah, so as Ali mentioned, I'm part of the Get More Brain team. So Get More Brain, we've developed a content-first digital platform for technical material. And really, in the last 2 years, we've been really focusing on the standards, and the norms industry. In terms of my own background, I have a bit of a portfolio career, but really for the last 11 years, I've been in leadership development, really helping companies with change and transformation. And what is happening now within standards, with standard development organizations, is that all of us, we're going through a change and transformation as technology is evolving, as the workplace is evolving, and as standards users are becoming a lot more sophisticated. So that's just a little bit about me, but let me go into my presentation. Is everybody able to see my screen? Can you see my?
Yes, we can see this. Yep, there we go. Yep, we can see it.
Wonderful. Okay. So the focus of my presentation is really exploring a different path, and that's really standards as a service. And as we're going to be discussing today, that this is something of an evolution around how to access, how to engage in the possibilities of distributing standards. And a lot of this is possible with the emerging technology, but also a lot of it is also possible with the coming of AI. And what we'll really be looking at is really the evolving landscape of standards, identifying opportunities for improvement. And one of these options is really standards as a service. And then we're going to take a look at standard as a service, or STAS in action, and what we've learned. And we'll talk about a specific case study with a client that Get More Brain has been working on. And finally, it's about shaping the future of standards and how do we make this much more of a collaborative effort. So as many of us are experiencing and are immersed in this, that there's the rise of AI. It's reshaping, again, what we've heard from numerous speakers, reshaping processes and decision making. There's an increased automation. It's looking at efficiency and redefining operational workflows, and as well as interoperability, demands for seamless real-time communication and systems and between systems. And so this is really what is shaping the evolution of standards and how standards users engage with the actual standards. Okay. Now, I wanted to just make this a little bit more interactive with the individuals that have joined the call. And if you were just to type in chat quickly, if you were to look at the rise of AI, automation, and interoperability, which one, if you were to select one, which one is having the most impact for you or inside your organization? And in chat, please just take a minute to type your answer. Ali, is anything coming through? Because that might not be.
I don't see anything. I'm not sure if the chat is.
Okay. So just for the purposes.
There we go. It seems like
Okay.
it seems like something is coming into the chat. Yes.
Okay. Let me go back.
So no, there's just a clarification question, but can you go over the three options again?
Yes, it's what's having the greatest impact for you or your organization? Is it the rise of AI, automation, or interoperability? Okay, I see somebody already reduced time invested in administrative activities. The rise of AI. Okay, I'll just give it one more minute and then I'll move on to the next. Okay. Automation, and so the rise from the few responses, I'm seeing the rise of AI is having a significant, followed by automation and workflows. Okay, so as we can see, this is touching all of our lives on a daily, really on a daily basis. So with these fundamental shifts that are happening, we also need to rethink and reimagine how our standards being accessed and how our standards being utilized. And what we're making the shift and the leap from is from digital paper to more of a context first approach, but still depending on the context of how we engage with standards. Digital paper is still very much a valid choice. It's trusted, it's familiar, and it's reliable. But at the same time, given where we are and the different shifts that are happening, content first, it actually provides new options for evolving needs. And this is much more of an approach for a workplace that we're in, that it has the rise of AI, automation, and interoperability. We have the opportunity to create standards in a much more engaging manner. And it also gives us an opportunity, really, the aim is to expand choices that meets today's demands. Okay, and as we're starting to see that not all users are the same, and some work at different pace and have different needs. And so if we compare users, that is a university student, an engineer, a field technician, or a researcher, the way they use and engage with standards is very different. They're going to be engaging with standards, how they retrieve information, the language that they're going to be using, updates. It's going to be at a different pace. And for that, we need to accommodate the different preferences and the different behaviors, the different projects they're working on, and really the work environment. Let's skip this. And so when we look at one option is standards, it's really standards as a service. It's a responsive, accessible services. And it's really helping individuals to think about standards in the way not the way we used to consume media, perhaps through in the way of as CDs or DVDs, but really much more in the way that we look at consuming information through, for instance, through Netflix or through Spotify or even Audible. Ultimately, it's not about just buying the information, it's about accessing it and how we're using it at what points in our life. And this is much more than a subscription service, but really looking at how we were able to use these documents. Okay, so what are the core features of STAS? It's really about easy access. These would be digital standards with greater compatibility and flexibility, making them easier to use and to find information. It's about extracting information that we need at the point of time when we need it and how we need it. When we're working with, in our case, when we're working with clients, individuals are able to extract specific requirements, curate them, also bring in other information from their work, and it becomes much more of a personalized experience depending on the work or the project they're doing. As part of this, we're able to provide automatic updates and changes that happen to the standards. Even if the information is curated, updates can be sent immediately to the individuals. So it's in a much more of a protected environment. And when there's updates that are made, they're updated on the spot. And of course, customized content that individuals on the platform, they can bring together information, not just from the standards, but from their own technical material, company information. They can bring in third-party material. So it really becomes much more of a knowledge source for an individual. And I think in this respect, it becomes much more than just a subscription service to a standard, but it becomes much more of an ecosystem of information. Okay. And so as we move forward in this project around STAS, we want to create enhanced value for the standards users and make standards relevant. And the shift, I mean, this is the shift towards STAS. This is what's helping us do it. We're providing users with much more integrated tools, seamless access, and really evolving models that contribute really to much more of a sustainable work environment. Again, this transformation, it fosters greater engagement between users as well as standard developers. And this also, we're trying to guide much more of a broader digital transformation inside organizations of how standards are being used and really maintaining the relevance. Okay. So bringing us to the AI connection. Right now, when we're bringing in AI and using standards, we're able to summarize standards. We're able to bundle standards together using AI. We're really using AI as really as a responsible application, and really using large language models in being able to process the information that we're able to extract from the standards. Okay. Now, one example that I do want to share with you is recently we started partnering with ElectroSwiss. This is the national standards body of Switzerland for electricians. One of the issues that they had is they were really focused on digital paper, and they wanted to transition much more to a content first environment, and they wanted to amplify the use of their standards. So the standards that we're working with is really to provide an experience that is much more smart, giving them a certain amount of layering where they can use the standards not only for example for electricians, but also in their training materials, in bringing certifications and accreditations. And it makes this flexibility a lot easier for individuals to engage. For example, a lot of the electricians, they were able to access standards not only on the PC, but on tablets and smartphones in their place in the field of work. They're also able to access standards in multiple languages, which is immediately able to translate. They will use AI. They will use AI to create different information packets in consolidating different standards. Altogether, there's about 5,000 users using basically in our platform, but really a STOS model. Okay. And finally, it's really about shaping the future of standards together. It's about providing enhanced value for users. It's about driving digital transformation. And it's really about creating a collaborative journey between the standards users and the standard development organizations, as well as the companies where the standards users ultimately reside. So it becomes this powerful triangle of really how do you move standards beyond digital paper and much more towards a service, standards as a service model. That's really it from my side.
Great. Thanks, David. We will now move on to our next speaker in the AI lab use cases. And we have Justin. Justin, do we have you on the line?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
For some reason, my video is not going on.
No problem. So we have Justin Theriault, who's a strategic account sales engineer at Accurus, and he will be providing us an overview more from the standards implementation use case. So over to you, Justin.
Perfect. Thank you. Can you guys see I'm not sharing, am I? Just 1 minute here. You guys see my screen, or am I?
No, not yet.
There. Let's see. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we do see it.
Perfect.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'm from Accurus. Thanks for having me. I don't know if all of you are familiar with Accurus or not, but we're the largest aggregator of engineering standards from across the world, and the largest engineering content. So putting it all on one platform, so being able to manage all this technical knowledge is a pretty big feat. So, we have 2.8 million industry standards now. Actually, it's more than 2.3 here. We got 40 million links between these standards, different kind of technical articles, journals, ebooks, patents, patent applications, utility models, various kinds of engineering and technical knowledge, all on one platform. We've been around for about 60 years or so, from the early days of delivering standards to our customers on, floppy disk, or probably actually just printed paper and documents, to CDs, and then eventually, as kind of technology took off, being able to store this on a nice cloud SaaS platform, and then being able to put a lot of technology behind it. So yeah, so what I'll present today is the different ways that we use AI on our platform to help our customers, work more efficiently, get more accurate information, get to the core information that they need, and various ways to create, digital threads across, call their model-based systems engineering process, or, getting to the core sources and creating traceability all the way through their workflows to it. So if you can imagine, as I mentioned, we have 2.8 million standards on our platform. If you can imagine, if we didn't have, some sort of technology stack behind that, or, some sort of AI to help you search for documents, it'd be kind of like finding a needle in a haystack. So the main types of AI we use on our platform are, mostly narrow AI, which is focused on, single task, and it's not generative. So for searching through millions of documents, NLP, natural language processing, or different kind of reg models and things like that are used to interpret like a question. For example, someone's putting a query in to find a specific information in a standard, and then provide the best possible results. So for example, a senior engineer could simply enter the name of the standard in the search box and instantly get the document needed. But in a situation where an engineer may not know the standards that apply to a specific project or application, he or she can ask a question, right? The more specific and detailed, the better. So as you can see with, this vague question up here, how do I ground structures and substations, still gives you, these ranked-based results that are using kind of the semantic matches between the question and information that's been found in the documents. So kind of very brief on, semantic search. It's finding separating the different words into a sentence, and then being able to, sorry, I think all my animations were removed. Sorry, there we go. So taking a sentence and language and then separating into different elements, so that the text can be interpreted by say a machine or robot or whatever it is behind it, AI, and then using that statement to then match it, say, with a query later on. So for example, Peter removed entirely the rust on the car, right? And so here we can separate this into different elements as, this is something Peter can do, this is something Peter can remove, and this is where a place where rust is located is the car. So now, and then, the type of removal here. So now, I can then ask a question, and it's going to go back into the indexed results, and then kind of match it with the semantic match here. So, what removes rust is the question I asked in the text. Greg removed entirely rust on the car. So in a short and simple way, that's kind of how our semantic search works out of, millions and millions of documents. What we also have is, a research assistant, which kind of takes it to the next level. So instead of asking one question on, how to remove rust or how to ground a base station, we can actually put a statement in like temperature requirements. You can put a Boolean statement if you want, welding-based materials, or just search welding-based materials. And our AI platform will actually ask hundreds and hundreds of questions around those topics, and then create these different lenses and paths to, go down. So if you want to learn more specific information on a topic, right? So if it's welding-based materials, right? So more specific part of that, what kind of base materials, what kind of welding, things like that. And then what kind of concepts, what are the disadvantages what kind of methods, conditions, locations, causes and effects, parts and functions, different things like that. So we have tons of different areas that you can go. So if it's a kind of a broad research you want to do on a specific topic and then narrow it down on something very specific that you maybe didn't even think of, right? We have this AI bot that's asking lots of questions behind a specific topic so you can get down to core information. And this can search through all the codes and standards on the platform, or patents, or a bunch of ebooks and other kind of learning periodicals and things like that. So it's giving you a broad base of knowledge content to search from. So now that we found, say, a core document, say like this one here, the structural welding code, after doing some specific searches here, right? This code can be, 1,000 pages long, right? So now getting to the core information, in that document is also a pretty big task. I think typically an engineer can, will go to the table of contents, look for a specific section, then scroll down to the document and look, right? So it can take a lot of time to get to the core information of the document, especially if you're not familiar with it or which sections to start looking for. So we can also use semantic search inside of our documents, right? So instead of just using a term search, which we also have, but if you're searching something about, welding a pressure vessel, inside of a document, and you search, in the term search, just put welding pressure vessel, it might come up with 1,000 results. And you have to go through all thousands of those to get to that core information. But we're also using semantic search inside of our documents as well, so that when a customer is asking us something about welding pressure vessels, right, it's giving you a ranked-based results of, where to find this in the document, right? So in the top 10 is most likely where you're going to find the result you're looking for. And the more specific you are, or specific, more narrowed down your searches, the quicker it can start finding this information for you. So now you can ask, a question inside of a document like this. So minimum preheat temperature applied to joint composed. And then you found the information you're looking for. And now now you've actually found the information, a specific section of that document has been, found for you. Now there's, this information might be really important to your research, or it also might have other links to standards, right? So this AWS standard has a link to ASTM, for example. So one of the other, sorry, just going back to the, so one of the things we actually do is dynamic linking. So we use, call it basic AI, right, to do some text recognition to find all the standards that are referenced inside other standards. And the benefits of having all the standards on a single platform like ours is that we can create these hyperlinks, or we call them dynamic links, to those standards. So you have this seamless transition, or you can click on this standard, right? So it says, these heat limitations shall not apply to this ASTM, right? But what if it's something important, says must comply with ASTM A913? Now you have to go search that document in a library somewhere and go pull it out and then start reading it. So what we've done is create these dynamic links to any standard referenced in a document, and then have a hyperlink to those documents specifically in our platform. So you can click on it, it opens it up in a new tab and gets to that information much, much, much quicker. So the other thing too, right? Like, so if you found the core information that you're looking for, and it's something that's pretty important to your design, and you need to be aware that that specific part of that document has changed or is going to change in the near future. We have several change management tools. One of it's called micro alerts. So For example, we can create a watch list for documents that we just want to be aware when they change. So every time there's a new revision, say of ASME, for example, that we're aware of those changes, it will send us alert and we get, we're told that the document has changed. But what if I don't care so much about this 1,000-page document? I only care about the first few paragraphs about a very specific topic in it. I can put a micro alert, so highlight a section, create an alert. So if that document changes in the future, I get an alert of that specific section. And then we can click to see the comparisons here. And it says, okay, what was the change in that specific clause or that specific paragraph, right? And it could say, okay, this clause was inserted where you previously highlighted, that section. So small changes, but detecting those changes, detecting what kind of change. So, if it's inserted, if it's something that was deleted, if it was something that was moved, so from one section to another, or something that just had changed, basic words or something like that. So the other thing here we have is also smart compare. So doing it document wide. So say you have ASME, a new revision just came out, you get the alert. Okay, now what? Now you want to compare maybe two specific sections of the document and see what has changed. Or maybe you have to go through the whole document and see what has changed, right? For some sort of risk mitigation, see how that impacts different businesses down the line that are really reliant on these standards. So what Smart Compare does, it takes two documents. It'll identify the different changes that occur, but also the type of changes. So for example, if I have, for example, these two documents are one revision versus the other, I have different types of changes here. So anything that's yellow is change. Anything that's green is something that has been inserted. Something that has been deleted is in red. And then something that's blue has been moved, right? So if you look at this whole document, anything in this middle gray bar here represents somewhere in the document that has been changed. So overall, this whole document has been changed. So what we do to make it easier for a user is a few tools. So some of it is filtering the types of change. So I only want to see the things that have been deleted from the past document. I can just click on deleted, right? And it'll highlight only the deleted parts. I also want to see, I can scroll side by side into documents, or say if I have one document, because, overall with changes, document sizes change. So it's really hard to keep that scroll parallel to each other. But we can actually click on this change here with this limitation, and then it will highlight exactly where that change occurs in the new revision, for example. So where was that deleted? Well, it should be in it should be in 1.2 here. So you see this little red represents the deletion of limitations. And now 1.2 is changed to standards, units of measurement. So we can see those different changes. So it's a really easy way to compare two documents side by side. The latest feature we've launched so far is a requirements viewer, document decomposition for various needs. So some of it, we've partnered up with several SDOs that allow us to decompose their content. So AWS being one of them. So being able to take a document, identifying all the requirements, the prohibitions, guidance clauses, miscellaneous information clauses, and classifying those in different kind of ways. And then we also take a statement, say like this, right? It's just a bunch of words, it's a sentence, creating a digital object. So adding specific tags or metadata tags to it so it's easier to find. So we can also find requirements based on the type of parameter here. If I start clicking down on the side of this table, I can start finding all the requirements that are mentioning a diameter here or a tolerance or depth. But also, so we add those tags to specific or to all the different requirements that are identified, but also adding, the section hierarchy and stuff. So then when we export this, say to a requirements management system like a DOORS or a JAMA or something like that, we have a bunch of metadata that helps organize these different requirements and allows a system engineer to better kind of organize and classify the requirements within a design. The other reason why we have threads is we had a lot of customers that have thousands of internal standards, and they realize they're paying a lot more for their, say if it's an oil and gas company, they're paying a lot more per project because their suppliers are building these different structures or things like that to the oil and gas standards and not the industry standards. And they find out they're paying a lot more because, maybe they have stricter standards for no reason at all. And suppliers typically follow the industry standards. So now they have to make specific changes. And now, it's going to be more expensive to build something. So we've had several customers reach out for a way to reduce the number of internal standards that they have and try to match them to internal standards or to industry standards. For example, welding, for example, if the oil and gas company has a bunch of different welding standards, let's see how many can comply with AWS, or see how many are different. And now let's compare those changes here. So, comparing this requirement on electrostatic discharge versus another standard, and seeing how similar they are, but also comparing those two documents side by side and being able to see, okay, this one tells you to abide by IEC 61000 here for testing. This one says to verify with a different test, MIL standard 461. So even though word for word or values are very similar, there's also some very subtle but important differences, say for the testing or the verification test in accordance with whatever standard that they're calling out here. So that's my slide deck. Ali, how am I doing on time?
You still have time. You still have 10 more minutes. So if you want to spend more time, you can.
Yeah, so I can give some small demonstration here of our platform here. So this is Engineering Workbench Professional. So again, this is how all of our customers access all their collections that they subscribe to from all the SDOs. And so the main power, the main function is to really help an engineer find the information they're looking for, right? So say if it's a senior engineer, right, they can find a specific standard from an SDO, right, and they know which one it is. They can just easily put it in the search bar and get to it. But you can also ask the very what design standards are used for substation structures, grounding, right? And I can start expanding my knowledge on what kind of what other kind of standards apply to grounding structures here. Or I can let's see. Or if I do find a specific standard, right, and then it's like, well, how quick can I get to the core information of that standard, right? So this is all about substation structure design, right? Instead of scrolling down to the table of contents, maybe I can find it pretty quickly there. Or if it's a really large document with several different sections talking about grounding, right, it can be pretty tedious to find information in there. So I can ask, how do I ground a structure? And then it'll give me some rank-based results based on that question. And then immediately I can get to that core, to that core information I'm looking for about grounding and substructures. But also, as I mentioned earlier, we also create dynamic links through all the content in our platform. So now say refer to IEEE 142 or IEEE 80, right? So then I can get to, that information much quicker, hop to IEEE Guide for Safety in AC Substation Grounding. And I say, well, how do I ground, fences or something like that? I can enter just the word here, but here I can get to the section, grounding of substation fences here. And what I mentioned with core information of is something that's pretty important to me. I want to be aware of changes or change management is, yes, setting stuff like, micro alerts, for example, that will keep track of any changes that occur in this standard in the near future, right? And then give me those comparisons when a change does occur. Or, if I want to do a side-by-side comparison when that document does change, right, I can use something like Smart Compare that's going to identify those two changes, or those two document changes. As I mentioned earlier, right, these documents are pretty fundamentally different, right? With all these changes, you can see this gray bar in the middle. All the gray represents any area in the document that has changed. So now we have to start narrowing down what kind of changes have occurred. I can see, okay, I only want to see the stuff that's been inserted in the new document. And I'll get to specific areas and then start seeing what those changes are. So if it's values in the table, for example, that could be pretty important parameters or specific formulas or things like that. I can click on this and then it's going to look in the document, see where those changes from table material constants, table 1 material constants. Saying we have a lot more values here, maybe more different materials and things like that, right? We're changing slightly the constant, maybe by several decimals or something like that. But we can try to find those changes or specific formulas, for example, right? And seeing, okay, this has been added since page 45. All of this information has been added. And then, yeah, going back to requirements here. Let's get back to, right, I can pull up a AWS document. We have this new function for the SDO content that we have partnerships with. So not all of them, but we've been building up our specific permissions from these SDOs to use their document to view requirements. So this will pull you up in the different requirements viewer for this AWS document. Just give it a little minute here. Right, and if I get to the core meat of this document, I can see how the different statements and clauses have been decomposed to different requirements, types, or statement types. So anything red is a requirement here. Anything also that has been anything that's been identified or any statement is also tagged with different types of tags here. So if it's talking about studs or stud welding, current electrode, things like that. So we can classify these different tags under, parameters, equipment, materials, or if it's referencing to other industry standards. So say this says, okay, it's referring, this specific clause says something about ASTM A36, right? We can actually reopen this document in EWB, but in the near future, actually, all of our dynamic links will be in this viewer here. Actually, both viewers will be together by the end of the summer, so there's no kind of transitioning outside of EWB to view requirements. So then I can click on the ASTM A36 dynamic link. It will bring me to that document so I can start viewing, the content inside of there. And then for, similarity compare, right? If I want to see what other, I doubt I'll have anything content-wise on here. But if I want to see what similar requirements are listed here, so there's just comparing it to other documents that have been uploaded to the platform. So I look at the bridge welding code here and see that these two requirements are exactly the same from these two AWS standards here. Where'd it go? 7.5. So we can compare side by side the different requirements and standards here. Studs shall be welded and automatically time stud welding, right? And it identifies the identical requirements, if you will. I think that's all I want to share. Thanks for having me, Ali, and I'll stand by for any questions during the question period.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So thank you to all the speakers, Vandana, David, Justin, for sharing the use cases. I think that really gives us a picture of how AI is really changing, the standards development, the research, implementation, all phases of standards lifecycle. So let's move on to our live Q&A session here. If you have questions, for any of the speakers, Vandana, David, or Justin, please type them into Q&A. I know that we have one question from Andrea, so I will ask her to go ahead and unmute and ask the question.
Thank you, Ali. And thank you to all the speakers. My question's actually for Justin. It's a bit specific. I was really impressed by the functionality that you've achieved in your engineering workbench professionals. Really, really impressive. Is that kind of functionality available in the construction information service?
I don't know. I'll have to ask. I'm not too familiar because I think Construction Information Service, that's a UK-based
Yeah.
program. I'll have to find out. But I can, yeah, if I can get your information maybe from Ali, I could give you an answer. Yeah.
That'd be great if you could, Justin. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries.
Okay, great. I see one question. How do you protect the IP of standards content? So that's a generic question. I don't know if who wants to take that one.
I can answer how we do it. So anything viewed on our platform cannot be, copy pasted. So the viewer has specific, if I showed you, right, there's specific tools that we have for micro alerts. We have one for annotations, right? So you can highlight a specific section of a paragraph and then create an annotation. So that'd be the equivalent of having like a sticky note and bookmarking that specific spot. But someone can't just take the content and copy paste it into a document. We have, with threads and the requirements, we've built special relationship with certain SDOs to allow us to detect requirements. We can export those in different digital formats. That specifically for digital or engineering purposes, right, and creating traceability and threading through different model-based systems engineering processes. But yeah, we really try to limit, how people, can copy the content off of the platform.
Great. David and Vandana, if you guys want to jump in on that as well, please feel free to. I know you both touched on that as well a little bit.
Sure. Yes, in our case, because we are a closed platform. So in order to get on the platform, you need to have we have either a single sign-on or you need to have a password to get on it. And so once you get on it, that traceability starts to happen immediately. And so if there's anything that's shared, I mean, it's really 100% foolproof. The only way if somebody was to use a mobile, just a smartphone to just perhaps take a picture, but nothing can go in or out of the platform. And again, because the content itself is protected, and also when individuals start curating that content in more personalized formats, we're able to trace who's using it at what time and how is it used.
Yeah, very similar. User authentication, which is very strict guidelines, and then the content is the knowledge base that each user owns. So it's not like that can be shared. So it could be grouped as a team. So the users could be a team in the same organization, but the user authentication and sign-ons are very, very well managed. So nothing open source is brought in. It's essentially you're learning on your knowledge base that you own, and then the performance keeps getting better over time as the system picks up on the feedback from the users as well.
And on top of, I think the single sign is something we also have, we have also very specific site licenses to make sure that, we abide by the copyright laws of who gets to access, right? So if you're part of a large company, right, the company will have licenses for specific sites, so locations where their offices are, right? So the offices that are not licensed do not get permission. We also watermark or time tag every document. So every time you open up a viewer, your name, so the username, the person who opened the document, the time it was opened is also written on the, like, watermarked on the paper. So say if someone were to download a PDF right from the viewer and then upload it through some on a Reddit forum or something like that, right? You could trace back to who was that user who downloaded, and shared that illegally.
All right, great. There's one more question that just came in through the chat. Is the tool, it's for Justin, is the tool you demonstrated available for SDOs? Is there a fee to use?
Say that again. The tool that I showed is it available for SDOs?
Yes, for Standards Development Organization. And is there a fee to use?
I'm trying to understand the core question. So our platform can be used by anyone who pays the subscription license. So our subscription goes to pay the SDOs their fees. So anyone can purchase or purchase a subscription to the platform, either if they're an SDO or a company or individual. We have customers of all shapes and sizes. So there is a fee, attributed to using Engineering Workbench Professional. So there's a platform fee and a SDO fee. So whatever content you subscribe to, so depending on what content, if it's IEEE, ASTM, ASME, they all have different prices. How many people you want to have access to it, how many sites you want to be available. Is all going to factor into the price.
Yeah. So it seems like yes, SDOs would also be able to utilize that. I don't see any more questions in the chat or Q&A, but one of the questions that I have, just listening to all of your presentations, David, you touched on a little bit on smart and smart standards, and how do you think that will change the consumption of standards moving forward? I know that ISO and IEC are actively working on smart standards as well. So, what do you think is the future of standards consumption?
Future, I believe it's going to be a lot more personalized to specific roles, to a specific project. So it's not going to come more as a generic document, but I think we have now the capability to personalize how the individuals are using the standards. Is it for a specific project? Is it for a specific task? But also the ability to personalize it right down to, what is my role inside the organization? Is it an engineer? Is it a field technician? Am I perhaps a researcher? And how I consume it, I can immediately go to the parts of the standard that I need. I can extract it. I can also bring in other content together, so it becomes much more of an information ecosystem, not just the standard itself. And I think this is one of the things, how consumption and how individuals will engage with standards. I think that's going to be the big leap.
Yeah. Great. And Vandana, I wanted to ask you, because of some of the use cases you shared, more on the project management side, does Infobeam also has something more on like the standards for SDOs, to kind of manage these standards projects, and what sort of AI capabilities are you implementing on that side?
So we have another tool called Stanza, which actually automates the standards development phases from the start of the generation of the content to maintaining the content, the committee management, the balloting processes. So all those modules are all in one platform. And we are now starting to look at how can we introduce AI for different stages. But this is our first tool, and it depends on what organization is ready for which tool. Is like that's where we start. So we are essentially doing workshops for use case discovery, as I shared with you, and we're trying to be very open about bringing the people and meeting organizations where they are in their journeys. So our products are also very flexible and configurable. So that's what we do. Like a lot of customizations happen within the projects, within the product, also based on the team's requirements. So yeah, this is where we started with the AI, engine, retrieving the data, utilizing this to answer the questions for the staff. They can answer questions quicker, and the field technicians can utilize this tool really well. So that's where we are right now.
Well, certainly a lot going on in standards development, research, and implementation, all phases of standards life cycle. Any more questions from the audience? Feel free to just raise your hand and I can unmute you, or type in your questions on the chat. Okay, well, does not look like we have any additional questions. Yeah,
Oh,
go
okay.
ahead.
That one is for me. Yeah, the really RAG-based chatbot is a really great approach, but how accurate response we use to get from this kind of AI assistance if data is very complex. So the output is as good as the input is, right? So if the quality of data is good, the output of the RAG-based solution would be good too. The content is not generating. All it's doing is like sifting through the whole large volumes of data and then finding the right content or the question with the context awareness for the question, and then picking the right answer. So I think the accuracy continues to go higher, but it doesn't, I think it's pretty high to begin with, but the summarization and everything starts to look better. The performance starts to look better. The answers start to look better as the tool learns from you, because it learns from your responses. So it's like a very personalized approach to utilizing and getting, talking to your standards. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I would say like easily 85 to 90, because it's not changing the content. It's actually pointing to the content and then picking it out for you, and also telling you where it's picking it out. And in the future, we are also adding the page citations that this information was at this page in this document.
Great.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Well, not seeing any more. I don't see any hands up. I don't see any additional chats. So let's move on then. Again, just thank you so much, Vandana, Justin, and David, for excellent presentations and overview of your solutions. I really appreciate it. And we will share, your contact information with all the attendees so they can reach out if they have more questions.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, Ali.
Great. So with that, let's move on to our last session, which is, essentially just a summary and recap of what was presented. And I will take over the screen. I think, Justin, you're still sharing it.
Am I? Okay.
Yep.
Weird. Okay, there we go.
Yeah. So we started out, with a keynote address from Manoj Saxena, and I'm so glad that he was able to join us from Responsible AI Institute. He was actually in London for another meeting, and he was able to attend and give us that keynote address, and really set the stage for some real-world examples, real-world impact of AI that is going on, and why we as standards professionals are there to protect, right? So it really was refreshing to hear his perspective on some of the stories and the impact of AI. And of course, his quote I copied, that the responsible AI is no longer an optional choice, right? It's required. While yes, there are some deregulation going on in some countries, and um, the focus on responsible AI have not decreased at all. There's a lot of focus, and customers still expect you to have the AI solutions being deployed responsibly. And then, the fact that the role of us as standards professionals is evolving with with AI. I mean, just what you heard from David, Vandana, and Justin just now with the use cases, you can see that when you interact with these solutions and services, um, you know, your approach to information, your approach to getting that information is going to change. That it's of course going to make a lot of processes faster. It's going to make it more efficient. So it's definitely, our role is definitely changing, and in with AI, and as well as the information that we are supposed to know in this process is also changing. So that was really good to hear from Manoj. Then we moved on to our panel session for AI for standards user, enhancing processes and driving innovation. We had three great speakers, Rohit, Hussein, and Denise, both, all three of them actually representing three different standards organization, where Rohit was representing Insights, and Hussein ISO, and Denise ULSC. And all three of those standards development organizations do a lot of work in either in AI in standards development, or just implementing the solutions using AI in the world of standards development. So, one of the key takeaways from me from that was that the role of standards in implementing AI solutions responsibly, which really kind of picked up on what Manoj presented in his keynote address, and it was kind of uh, good to get that validation from the standards development organization itself, that yes, that when they are looking at AI solutions, they are also looking to implement these solutions responsibly. And we heard a lot of talk about Gen AI solutions, and how Gen AI solutions are, one of the cases presented was how Gen AI is being used to help non-native speakers to communicate and contribute effectively in the standards development, which is a big plus, because for those of us that participate in standards, we know that sometimes, especially at the international platform, sometimes when participants don't have English as their first language, they struggle sometimes to contribute effectively. And if Gen AI is there to help them in any way to contribute them effectively, then that's a great plus point for standards participant, because you as a standards participant are now going to be able to understand the other participants better, and have their perspective heard, and be able to respond it in a way that is meaningful for them. So we also heard that there are being guidelines and tools such as the ISO companion tool that are being rolled out for standards participant, and are currently in development, which is going to really take this to the next step for standards participant, having some sort of a guardrails, guidelines, and tools for standards participants, especially at the international level, like ISO and IEC, would be really helpful, and would go a long way. We also heard a clear message that AI in standards is here to stay, and we will continue to see it being progressed to increase efficiencies, collaborate and coordinate with, whether among standards participants or among standards organization, and help make the overall standardization system effective. So it was, again, thanks to all the panelists that participated in this panel session and shared their insights and initiatives. But it really kind of validated, the responsible AI approach in the standards development. And then, of course, we just wrap up our session for the use cases with 3 great speakers, Vandana, David, and Justin. And thanks again to all 3 of them who shared a lot of insights and gave some examples and demos on how AI is being used in all phases of standards development, right? Whether it's standards development, standards research, standards implementation, or looking long term at converting standards from really taking that standards from PDF and moving it to standards as data, right? So to really enable that standards as a service, and I mean that's where the direction is going, and I think having that intelligence helps to steer the direction of standards organization that we all participates in, and help to think long term and see what actions do we as standards professional need to take in order to stay, in order to be effective, in order to stay relevant, in order to continue to make progress in standards. So thank you once again to all speakers. I really appreciate all of your insights and your presentations. And with that, I will hand it over to Andrea for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Ali. And I would just like to close the webinar by really thanking everybody on behalf of Ifan that participated, particularly our keynote speaker, Manoj Saxenda, for his insightful keynote on responsible AI. I thought it was fascinating, and I'm going to be signing up to the Rogue AI Chronicle, which looks like a useful document. I'd also like to thank all our panel speakers for taking the time to join us today and share their perspectives on the Enhancing Processes and Driving Information panel. That was very interesting. I've learned such a lot, and also, of course, from the user cases for standards users. It's been a really hugely great learning opportunity today. But most of all, I'd like to thank Ali for putting together the webinar and putting together a group of really interesting speakers. It's just really well done, Ali. I mean, a fantastic webinar, absolutely brilliant. I think everybody will have enjoyed it. I'm looking forward, as you mentioned earlier, to sharing it with people who weren't able to attend today. And I, in fact, had a couple of emails from people that weren't able to attend and asking about its availability. It will be available on our LinkedIn page, our YouTube channel, and our website. However, we are a very small team at Ifan, and the person that does the webinar editing and posting is actually away at the moment. So I'm afraid you're going to have to wait a couple of weeks till she gets back before all that happens, but it will be there. And lastly, can I close by thanking everybody who attended today? Attendees don't often get thanked, and it's great to have you. If you'd like to learn more about Ifan, do contact Ali or myself, or look on our website. And I think that's it for today. Thank you all very much.
Thank you all.